Hello and welcome to Atlantic Fellows Conversations. I'm Petronella Ngaba, Program and Impact Lead at the Atlantic Institute. In May 2024, Atlantic Fellows from across Africa gathered in Nairobi, Kenya to discuss cross-program, cross-continental collective action needed to dismantle inequities on the continent. The convening looked specifically at pressing issues in Africa, including the economy and trade. One of the panels was on regional integration within the African Continental Free Trade Area and focused on the cotton, textile, and apparel regional value chain. Panelists included Dr. NONCEDO VUTULA, former senior South African government official on agriculture, rural economic transformation, trade, and international relations; PHYLLIS WAKIAGA, chief executive of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers; and the industrial development expert, Dr. Papa Dembe Tiam. Here is a recording of that panel, which was facilitated by Atlantic Fellow for Social and Economic Equity, MAUREEN SIGAUKE.
Good morning, everyone. I love how this panel discussion is seamlessly weaving from the solidarity conversation. And I agree that regional integration and solidarity are essential components if we are going to confront and redress the asymmetries and the disparities between the developing countries and the developed countries. I have three people who have got good insights when it comes to regional integration that are going to help us talk about this topic. And the topic that we're going to be talking about is regional integration, focusing on the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. We are going to be then streamlining it by using a case study of what is happening in the textiles industry. So we are going to talk about that industry as a case study of the AfCFTA. To do that, I have three amazing speakers. PHYLLIS, an amazing family-oriented lawyer. Go on her Instagram feeds. She'll talk about how she's a daughter, she's a wife, and a mother to already 4 leaders, isn't it?
Yes, 4 of them.
So, PHYLLIS, just introduce yourself. Yeah.
Thanks for that. My name is PHYLLIS WAKIAGA. I'm an Eisenhower Fellow, so I'm also a fellow of a different program. I'm a mother of 4 children, a wife, but professionally an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And I've been doing a lot of work in public policy, international trade and investment. Previously, I worked at the Association of Manufacturers for 9 years. I used to be the chief executive officer there and did a lot in terms of driving industrial policy within East Africa. We worked on trade agreements, the COMESA East Africa Community, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, amongst others. For the last 2 years, I've been a senior advisor at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. So at the Institute, I lead the work on industry and commerce globally. What we do, we work in about 41 countries, supporting political leaders to get things done. So helping them to prioritize the work that they need to do within their terms in office and putting in place policies and helping them to deliver. A key part of our work is on delivery and implementation. So that's what I do currently, and it's really a pleasure to be in the room with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, PHYLLIS. And sitting next to PHYLLIS is NONCEDO VUTULA. No?
Good morning, everyone. My name is NONCEDO VUTULA. I work for the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance based at the University of Cape Town. And we work closely with the AfCFTA Secretariat to implement the AfCFTA agreement. So we work with 4 regional value chains that have been prioritized by the AfCFTA, one of them being agriculture, for the love of food, cotton textiles for the love of fashion, pharmaceuticals so that we are healthy and we can sustain ourselves, and renewable energies. We cover the whole spectrum of the AfCFTA, including the phase 2 issues that include intellectual property and other things. My background is agriculture. You may have picked it up. I've worked for the government of South Africa for many years, and I've done trade negotiations and agriculture and climate change previously. I'm happy to be with you here and share my thoughts on regional integration.
And right next to me is Dr. Tiam, but we're not going to call him that. He gave me a go-ahead. We're going to call him Papa. So Papa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. It is very interesting, the type of exercise we did yesterday, because we learned to be how we are individually and collectively. That means that if we have to be together, we need to have a common thinking framework about what we would like to achieve together. And to this type of exercise, maybe God has brought me to be an epistemologic subversion person, because I have decided since very young to be the bearer of a new political economy for the development of Africa. I was trained first as a company management person, as a financier. But when I realized that we were implementing what was suitable to other economic development organizations, I decided to create what we called interface strategies for cluster development and economic integration. I used to teach it in the Switzerland universities as the youngest professor. And then I decided to create a private development company called Africa Trade and Economic Development Interface Service in 1988, which in 4 years has created 29 value chains from products manufactured in Africa, I would say from the farm to the fork. We have something like 18 brands that was distributed in Switzerland supermarkets and around the world later. So this has led me to be advisor to the Swiss government and become even a real and official advisor in the system, which led me to sell all my private interests, not to be in conflict of interest. So that made me try to shape all the work on the Swiss Office for Trade Expansion or the Swiss Federal Office for Economic Affairs. That was really committed in bringing public-private partnerships on value chains in Africa. To make it short, borrowed by the German government, then I became a director at the European Commission in charge of private sector development and trade development. Later on at the OECD, where I decided to bring the first time OECD in Africa, because I've always believed that our future is in our common solidarity. So this was the first time in 2003 that we organized the OECD International Conference for Investment and Trade in Africa. This is from there that Paul Wolfenson of the World Bank requested me to come and be the troublemaker. Having published several books showing how the World Bank was manufacturing poverty, he came to tell us how to do shared prosperity. That led me to Ghana. For Ghanaians who are here, I was the father of the Ghana Free Zone and Multipurpose Industrial Development Park, which has created a whole industrial city in Tema. And the whole program has created 305,000 jobs for Ghanaians. But I didn't forget about the expatriate. For them, they have 11,000 jobs in there. So you can fly over the zone. There is absolutely no way to fit an enterprise. This is in that capacity I've accepted that my brother Eliman, who didn't say who he is because he was part of the 3 guys who brought these 2 young people in Senegal as prime minister and president. Right? Yeah. He's very modest. But when he told me that he convinced me to come, I said I cannot say no. But it put me into trouble because the president of the African Development Bank, knowing that I am here, has put pressure on me to say you cannot go with these guys and not attend my annual meetings. So I'm here at your service, maybe as one of the eldest people here, maybe not by age, but by curriculum. And I'm really at your service to see how we can help make this event a terrific success. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So to just give you a grounding of how this is going to go, because I don't want this panel discussion to assume that we're all operating from the same wavelength. So we're going to start by talking about what does regional integration mean, give an overview, what is the link of regional integration and trade. Then we're going to narrow it down and start talking about the historical evolution of free trade agreements, which I think you already started talking about. From there, we are going to focus on the African Continental Free Trade Area. Then we're going to look at the case study of the textiles and cotton industry as an example of how the Africa Continental Trade Area is working. And from there, we're going to start talking about the real things, in my view, the concerns, the criticisms, the challenges, what we're hoping to get. And we're going to start with you, Phyllis.
Yes.
What is regional integration?
Thank you for going right there. We don't want to assume everyone is a trade expert in the room.
Yeah.
But basically, regional integration is in line with the solidarity you're talking about. It's basically when countries in a specific region come together to coordinate and cooperate on either economic issues, social issues, or political issues. What they try to do is mainly to eliminate trade barriers, to look at how they can harmonize their policies, recognize certificates and other documents across, how they can enable the flow of goods, of capital, of services across the borders. There are various forms or levels of integration. So you have free trade areas, which is what the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is. And in an FTA, basically, the countries in the group eliminate their tariffs. So tariffs are the duties you trade under. The quotas, because sometimes you have quotas that limit how much you trade or move goods between each other. and preferences. Then the second level is customs unions, where you have a common external tariff. The East Africa Community is a customs union because we have one common external tariff that we charge any products coming into the East African Community. Then you have common markets like COMESA, the common market for East and Southern Africa. There, what you do is you remove the barriers in the movements of goods. Then you have economic unions. I believe the EU is an economic union where you even have monetary policy and currencies that are similar, and then political unions. So those are the different levels of regional integration. The main benefit is that when people integrate regionally, you're trying to create more economic growth within the region, because by coming together and simplifying some of those processes I talked about, you're creating a bigger market, you're leading to more efficiency within that region, building and growing competitiveness because of the economies of scale. It also leads to political stability in certain regions because you're able to harmonize and have more cooperation amongst yourselves and economic growth. So yeah, that's regional integration from my point of view, and I'm happy if the others could add to that.
No, I know you come from the southern hemisphere of the continent. How does regional integration play out? And you're going to answer the same as well from the northern part of Africa. How does regional integration look like?
In the Southern African region, I think PHYLLIS has explained it well, that's how it works. But I think the politics play a bigger role in making sure that regional integration works. I think one of the requirements is political will. But because of the instability in Africa in general, but particularly in Southern Africa, then we see impediments into regional integration and ultimately the benefits that come with economic integration. One of the other things that I would like to highlight that impede regional integration is the lack of resources within the regional economic communities, where they cannot even self-sustain themselves. Another issue in Africa is the overlapping regional economic communities where they end up competing for the same resources. Then there's also duplication. I will pause there.
Okay. Papa.
Thank you so much. First, you reminded me when I was taking my first classes of regional, all these definitions of the theories of custom unions and everything. I'm coming to that because the semantics are very important. The word regional integration itself is improper. Because you integrate functions, you don't integrate space. You integrate functions within an economic space. So what we're trying to integrate is the function of production and trade, integrating value chain within an economic space. So the correct word is regional economic integration, or regional financial integration, or regional commercial integration. Why I am saying that is that by taking the stance of regional integration, just as a concept, they have bureaucratized and institutionalized it to make heavy bureaucracies, just like what you are saying, all these overlapping regional economic communities. So we created some institutions that are pregnant and resisting to change. So you can design somebody who's going to be a head of a community without being the bearer of the substance of the changes that we need to bring into Africa. You can see my point of view. This is why I have defined regional economic integration as a transformative action that would distribute integrated growth opportunities within a given economic space. The only problem we are having now, and the main problem, is that our bureaucracies that are in charge of regional integration, quote unquote, are not conscious of that. This is why you may ask yourself, why since the Organization of African Unity in 1963 that became African Union, that created all this, hasn't helped the country, the Africans, and their own economies to integrate. So I think having given this definition, this is very important. The same way that you guys help us redefine who we are and why we are here, I would bank on you to push us very critical questions so we can come up with an approach of regional integration that will be satisfactory to everyone.
Thank you, Papa. And this is how the panel is going to go. We are going to have the definitions as we've been given, but we're also going to land at a point where we recognize the challenges that certain definitions come with, but also give us a space where we need to redefine things. And that's where Papa landed, isn't it? There are challenges with regional integration within the African continent, and we need to then redefine how we integrate. Let's start talking about the free trade agreements again. there is another notion that some people might not be very conversant with. So what are free trade agreements and how are they different from the African continental free trade area? And I'll start with you, NONCEDO.
A free trade agreements, as it has already been alluded to, 2 or 3 regional formations or countries that come together for a particular purpose. It's usually economic, political, or social. How the AfCFTA is different from the others is that it's not only an economic and political integration, but it has an element of industrialization. So the term that we use at the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance is developmental regionalism, which means that as we integrate, we're also building, we're also industrializing, we're also dealing with the structural transformation issues that are eminent in Africa. You hear us talking about regional value chains, which means that we develop regional value chains in the specific regions in Africa so that we broaden economic transformation, not only focusing in one specific country or one specific region, but we broaden it in the region. You may be aware that the levels of development in Africa are different. There are more developed countries and less developed countries. And there's also a concern in Africa that those that are less developed will be swallowed by the bigger economies. Hence, we're talking about regional value chains. I'll make an example. If we are breeding cattle in Botswana, we want the vaccines to come from South Africa. We want Lesotho to process the leather. That's how we develop a regional value chain, so that we all benefit in the whole value chain.
Just to emphasize what has been said, one of the ambitions was to see how Africa could trade more with itself, but also grow value addition. I think all of us have had the statistics that if you look at how much we trade amongst ourselves as a continent in Africa, it's probably 15% of trade happens within the continent. And if you look at other places like Asia, the EU, the trade is over 50%. So what the AfCFTA is trying to do, from what we are saying, is to create those value chains across the region so that we see more trade happening regionally. The other ambition, of course, is to lead to more value addition, industrialization, and that structural transformation. Because currently, as a continent, only 2% of global manufactured trade is from Africa. So we produce a lot of primary raw materials. If you take a country like Kenya, for example, we export tea. It's one of our biggest exports. But out of that tea, only 3% of it is value added in the country. So 97% of it goes out of the region without value addition. So the ambition then is to see how do we set up industries, how do we take advantage of the different strengths within the regions, how do we even collaborate? Because if you look at countries, maybe for example, Zambia and DRC, they have certain critical minerals that are required for electric vehicles, for example. How do we create a value chain that would ensure that these minerals are value added more within the region and through the joint collaboration of countries across borders? And that then moves to things like how the infrastructure within the continent is connected to ensure that you're able to even move your products across the regions, how we build our skills base and everything. So that's just saying that AfCFTA is more ambitious than just a free trade area. It's really trying to develop, industrialize Africa as a region to really create more economic growth. It's an ambitious target that I think can be achieved, but it takes a lot of give and take, even from the negotiations on rules of origins and other things. That is what will be required to take this forward.
Papa, I just want to tap into your experience with regards to the evolution. How did we come to have the AfCFTA? Where are we now? Because I know NONCEDO was talking about phases. What phases have we gone through? Where are we now? And what are the next steps?
I'm actually very much amazed in total solidarity of your approach, because this is a dramatical change. Because taking things bottom up, industrial development means only mass production. But industrialization itself is a function that you can apply in agriculture, you can apply in tourism, you can apply. So your approach is the right one. I'm very happy to hear about that, because in general, in regional economic integration for us, I only see this type of international civil servants that read the same speeches that you can sometimes just, when you screen them, you realize if they are talking about Eastern Africa, but the same thing. So I agree with them. So in order to make it practical, and I would like to be very close, to come close to you guys, because there is a way to do it, is that to know, for instance, if you have a potential, how do you call it, comparative advantage in some areas, like you're talking about minerals, and you are talking about all these clusters of minerals that could help support the transition in terms of electric vehicles and everything. Your question would be, which type of, I was thinking of the term in English yesterday, it was original equipment manufacturers. If you translate that, that means, for instance, in Ghana, where we have brought Caterpillar to process rubber into tires. So if we align on this OEM, then we will position ourselves in the middle of a value chain, international value chains, but that take the roots in Africa. That means that if you position yourself in the way that we will be clustering all activities around rubber farming, around rubber supply chains of rubber materials, you can make your imagination to vacate from the seed you are planting to the tire that is manufactured in Tema and that is servicing Volkswagen that has now come to Ghana thanks to this to make assembly, to go to South Africa with BMW and Mercedes and everything. This is the way actually you get yourself in value chain that are internalized. Then you become indispensable in the system. So our approach to regional integration should be to develop this type of competitiveness platforms and align them on several segments of the potential value chains that are not yet exploited. So I hope that we will get the opportunity to take practical examples on the areas you are working to see how we're going to transform some underexploited production lines into solid and supply value chains.
So we've been talking about this highly ambitious, quite different phenomena compared to the usual free trade agreements. But I wanted to find out from my panelists what prerequisites must be in place if this ambitious continental free trade area is going to achieve the results that it is intended to do. I see, Phyllis, you're ready to go. Go.
I think the first one, and you spoke about it, is the political goodwill. Because the reality is we've been having the regional economic cooperation at EAC level, SADC and others, and sometimes sitting in those rooms, even to unlock non-tariff barriers and technical barriers to trade, you realize sometimes maybe the political goodwill does not exist at all times. So for this to succeed, the political goodwill will be critical because that is what would lead then to harmonization or change of laws within countries. The other one is, I think, carrying the people along because at the end of the day, much as we are saying this is about economic integration, it's still about people. So if the businesses, the SMEs, the citizens can see the value of why we need to have a unified Africa Continental Free Trade Area, that I think would be critical to driving this regional integration. And then definitely resources, because the things we are talking about are heavy lifting. Industrialization, creating value chains, structural transformation, industrial policy, all that requires capacity and resources, whether it's financial resources or even technical and human resources to be able to implement those changes. So those are the three, I think, from my point of view, that would be critical.
Go on now.
I agree with her fully, and I would like to add on the skills that are required to make sure that this agreement works. We spoke about the political will, but we also have to bridge the gap between what happens at the political level and at the level of technical expertise. The negotiators need to communicate more with the politicians so that whatever is pronounced is practical and is doable by the technical experts. Then the second thing for me is the resources, particularly financial resources. We know that one of the reasons why these regional economic communities are not working is because they are not funded within Africa. Africa needs to find a way of funding its own initiatives, because if we do that, we are able to prioritize what is a priority to Africa, or even to determine what we want as a priority. A point in case is when we had a problem with COVID-19, where we could not even get vaccines. But if we prioritize vaccines in Africa, we are able to supply Africa and we are self-sustainable. So funding for me should be coming from Africa instead of going to beg, and then it comes with all the conditions.
Papa?
Okay, let me start by giving you one anecdote. When the late President Babacar Ndiaye of African Development Bank requested me to talk to African head of states for them to tell me the reason why they are not opening borders while having signed, I decided to make it short by going to Gabon when I met the late President Bongo. Over a drink, the question was discussed. He said, Papa, look at Gabon. At that time, there were only 1 million inhabitants, surrounded with incredible resources. And he say, you have here the Zaire at that time, now the DRC. He say, in our small Gabon, we are only 1 million. I have signed all the protocols for free movements of people, goods and services. But if I open up my borders and comply with what I have signed, the 100 million Congolese will invade Gabon. So unless you tell me what type of economic policies, strategies, programs, and intervention can fix the Congolese, then I will not open my borders. So that means that if you want to preach this type of thing and walk the talk, you need to create what I call competitive attractiveness within the whole economic space. So you need to see, okay, what Gabon could benefit from regional integration if it is not to help them develop their own economy, internal value chains, so you can have things to trade between you. So Congo's people will be busy working there in Gabon and people can move freely. So as an entrepreneur, I say you need to help the political will. There is no free solidarity as such. Even if I give to the poor, this is because I need my peace of mind to say that when I go to sleep, I am not treating myself as an egoist, as a selfish person. So bear it in mind, my friends. Number one, you need to help them because being a president doesn't make them know what you guys know. Don't underestimate that. Good leaders need followers, but to follow, you need to point to them the direction. Number two, funding. As a Swiss banker, just recently we had negative interest rates in Switzerland. It means that if you put 10 million Swiss francs in the bank, this is not the bank paying you interest. You are paying the bank for keeping your money. And you are saying we lack funds. No, as a Swiss banker, tell me which type of projects you have that you would convince about the feasibility, along the whole chain of custody of the whole operations, and I'll find you the money. I'd come again to Ghanaians. In 2006, when I was responsible for the Trade and Investment Gateway, the IMF had the program with Ghana from 2003 to 2006, when they were just supplying 120 million to Ghana, but they were telling the president, but then you have to go on austerity. Meaning, for instance, VRI wouldn't subsidize electricity. You cannot subsidize this, you cannot subsidize research and everything. And he told me, Pap, how can they ask me not to fund development because they need to fund the way we are running our administration? I say, you are posing the same question. President Obasanjo, when he was president of Nigeria, when he called me to say, you are not stupid, tell me why for 100 million, they will ask me to surrender my sovereignty. I say, you are a farmer and you are a soldier. How many people you are in Nigeria? He say 110 million. I say, if every Nigerian give you $1, you get your 110 and you keep your sovereignty. He jumped on me and started to hug me. So I told the anecdote to President Kufuor. He said, okay, find me a solution. I say, you give me 3 hours. But in the interim, get your ministers to tell me where they are falling short in their budget. And when he comes back, we organized the first presidential advisory council in Ghana, in Akosombo, when we brought all the operators and we agreed on the approach to funding Ghana. You remember what? We raised 450 million. This is how he went to the television and announced that he was stopping it with IMF. And believe me, I was nearly fired by the World Bank. So that's it. That means we need to evaluate the all segments of the chains of custody of our operations. And you guys, as the expert, need to come with the solution for them. Don't overestimate their ability to give you direction. You, the experts, in front of the reality, are the one who are calibrated to give them the direction.
So we've talked about the prerequisites. Now I want to talk about the concerns and criticism surrounding the AfCFTA, because they are there. As a trade unionist myself, one of the major concerns is this growth that we're talking about. Is it not going to be negative? Is it not going to result in voiceless growth? Where people are growing, but they cannot talk? Is it not going to result in rootless growth, where you eradicate a sense of identity within different people? Is it not going to be a jobless growth? where you're creating jobs that are not decent, that do not give people dignity as they are working, is it not going to be a futureless growth that does not bring the young people into the fold? Is it also not going to be a growth that does not take care of the environment? Those are some of the concerns that the trade union, for instance, is carrying. And I wanted to hear from you what some of the concerns, Papa, you have related to the Africa Free Continental Trade Area Agreement.
You mean from trade unions as protesters?
We're usually protesters.
Or as policy advocacy?
I think that's another debate. But I think we are also protesting as much as we are preferring solutions. But I just want to hear from your end. What are some of the concerns before we talk about me being a protester?
I believe in collective consultations.
Yeah.
I don't want to give you another anecdote. Otherwise, you will feel that I am too old to be sitting with you.
You said it yourself.
I believe that the problem we are having is that how we build the content and the process of our policy dialogue. I was saying people are doing national dialogues over politics, over this and that, but the national dialogue is about what do we want to make of our resources to build our economies on their strengths. So this would be the one that should guide policy advocacy. Because if we stand from the point of view of saying, okay, I'm fighting for my own church, this one is fighting for his own church. So everybody has a stake. But we want to bring us together. In Ghana, my last TV broadcast was called Ghana Must Have a Common Direction in terms of economic development, regardless of the NPP, the NDC, and any political party. A country needs to agree on the common direction for this economy. That couldn't be a quarrel of church, of chapters, and everything. So at the national level, so you trade unions protesting should come and put their thing on the table, others also, and you build the dialogue around looking for a common direction where everybody has his fair shot. And I think this is the type of thing that makes sense, that we did yesterday here. And it was surprising that we had how many tables here? 6 tables. But each table came with the same conclusion. You know why? Because everybody was looking for the same direction, common direction. So what we can do here, where we have several nationalities, people who pretend to lead our countries cannot do that. And you call them leaders?
Elected officials.
I like that. But I've moved on from just being a protester, just to let you know. What are some of the concerns and criticisms?
Mine is the implementability of the AfCFTA. I think we have this big vision, broad, very impressive, but when it comes down to implementation, do we have our house in order to be able to implement the AfCFTA? I don't think so.
Okay.
There is something called in trade facilitation, meaning that our systems for the free flow of trade speaking to each other. From where I'm sitting, they are not speaking to each other.
Yeah.
If you are transporting vegetables from South Africa to Zimbabwe, you have to stop in that border for 12, 18 hours. So these are the systems that are not speaking to each other. The roads are not up to scratch to transport the goods. We are not using the sea enough, or it's costly, the air is too costly. So we need to deal with trade facilitation issues as the AfCFTA. But then another issue for me is how do we nationalize the AfCFTA and how do we popularize it? What is this AfCFTA to an ordinary person who wants to trade? What are the things that we need to have in place in order for you to enjoy the benefits of the AfCFTA? I don't think we talk about it a lot. People don't know what this animal is. Yeah, those are the two for me that are critical.
Yeah, Phil?
Mine will just tie on what everyone has said, that inclusivity and carrying everyone along. But more importantly, the private sector reality, which is close to what you've talked about, because it's one thing to sit in the room and negotiate a good document, but what is the practical reality on the ground? So for the last over 1 year, there's been the GTI, the Guided Trade Initiative, taking place. And the reality on the ground is a bit different from what we say in rooms. So for example, one of the exporters from Kenya, I was looking at the report the other day, they still had a high freight cost. They were trying to export a product to Ghana under that Guided Trade Initiative. They took 55 days to export the product. When it arrived there was a lot of challenges clearing the product without paying tariffs, despite the fact that they should not pay tariffs. So the reality is having the private sector, because they're the practical users of the AfCFTA, to be able to unearth these issues and have them addressed. So I think the GTI, the Guided Trade Initiative, is quite critical, and how we take those lessons, because there are a number of companies that have participated, and turn them into solutions is going to be important, because that's where the rubber meets the road. It's one thing to sit in the room, but the reality is when you actually go and try to trade.
Thank you. So we now have, I hope, a nominal understanding of the AfCFTA. What I want us to do now is to provide the synopsis of how that is playing out in the textile industry. No, do you want to take it up?
So I spoke about the regional value chains, and one of them is cotton textiles. And the reason that is prioritized is because most women are employed in this sector, and it used to be a prominent sector in Africa until the structural adjustment programs happened. So the plan is to revitalize that sector and get it where it used to be. Where we are with that is that we've done the analysis of the capabilities of the sector in Africa, working with key stakeholders in Africa. We have discussions with the various stakeholders on what is it that needs to be done. And we've been asked by the trade ministers to draft a 5-year strategic plan, which will look at what are the capabilities, what investment options are there to revitalize the sector. One of the reasons why we are focusing on developing a strategy is that at the level of the negotiations, PHYLLIS spoke about rules of origin. One of the key sticking points in the negotiations for the AfCFTA is on rules of origin, where member states are supposed to agree on the nature of a rule of origin that will be applicable in Africa. We've agreed on a number of them, about 92% of them, but the percentage that is remaining is on cotton textiles and automobiles. So the issue here is that some African countries want a weak rule of origin, which will allow them to import certain components and make a few changes and certify the commodity as African. That weak rule of origin weakens the industrialization that we are preaching in Africa. Then a few countries in Africa on cotton textiles want a stronger rule of origin, which requires localization, that the cotton that we produce in Africa, we do manufacturing in it, processing of it, and we sell it and we certify it as an African commodity. So that's where the sticking point is. So why we do the strategy is that we look at how we bridge the gap between the two positions in Africa. So we're talking to the countries that have interest in having a weaker rule of origin versus the countries that have an interest in the stronger rule of origin, so that we bridge the gap, so that we can move. Because if we don't finish the negotiations, we will continue trading, but there are certain lines, tariff lines, that we are not able to trade in cotton textiles as well as in automobiles. The other elephant in the room in Africa is second-hand clothing, which weakens whatever we advocate for in developing the cotton textiles value chain. There are countries that benefit from second-hand clothing. The downside of it is how do we dispose of the second-hand clothing, because you can get a big bale from wherever. You find that only 10% of the goods can be traded and usable. What do you do with the rest? It affects the environment. So those are some of the things that we are driving with private stakeholders as well as experts from different bodies like the International Trade Center, helping us to find a solution on cotton textiles regional value chain.
PHYLLIS?
I think she's simplified it so well, but basically that's where the challenge is. We have certain economies that are very well developed. They're probably doing end-to-end, all the way from textile to the apparel to even the fashion. But we have some countries that bring in the fabric and simply stitch it together. So that's what the dilemma is. How do we have a rule of origin that accommodates all this? It starts then with the vision and the ambition. Where do we want to be? Do we want to continue doing limited value addition in our region and then exporting products? So an example, a typical country that exports under the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, you'll find that maybe 80% is imported, 20% is local value addition. So the value doesn't remain in the country. And what a stronger rule of origin would do would mean that you have to do a lot more within the continent. But the reality is, because of the varying levels of development of the countries, you can't do it overnight. So it means what then is the middle ground and what timelines do you put to ensure that you develop those capabilities within the different countries so that over time you're able to have more value addition. So it starts even from the planting of cotton. In the 80s, before the structural transformation, as you said, there was a lot of cotton production in the continent. But over time, a lot of people abandoned planting cotton. So it starts from even getting farmers to go back to planting cotton, looking at how you can incentivize that, whether you're looking at organic cotton or BT cotton, the entire debate from the agricultural value chain all the way to the production and all the way to the market. So that's one of the big debates at the moment about the sector, and that's why there's a stalemate on the rules of origin for the textile and apparel sector. The second one you spoke about is the second-hand issue. I know there's a time under the East Africa community where Rwanda took a position to ban second-hand clothes, and they were locked out of the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act because there's a very strong lobby behind second-hand exports from the US to Africa. I know there's also conversation now in EU about what happens to second-hand clothes, because there's a position that should they be regenerated in the EU or should they come to the continent. We are also working, for example, at the institute where I work in West Africa. We are working with Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, that region, to look at the possibility of having a West Africa apparel regeneration initiative, because Ghana is the largest importer of second-hand clothes globally. And that region is the largest producer of cotton. So how do we get this fabric, regenerate it, use virgin cotton fiber, and create new fabric that can then be used for production, for export, and that would be green fabric. So there are those conversations, but if in the future we have a ban, say from EU or AGOA, bringing in second-hand clothes, it means then you don't have the feedstock for a regenerative industry. So it's all those things happening at the same time. But yeah, that's the reality on the ground as you negotiate these agreements, that because countries are at varying levels, the ambitions are different for industrialization, the capabilities, the technology, and everything, you have to arrive at a win-win situation. And for automobile and textile, it's proved more difficult than all the other sectors. Yeah.
Papa, I could really feel you laughing almost.
No, not
and
laughing.
thinking and reflecting.
It just reminds me my early days of when I was at the desk of the Swiss government before the trade-related organization, the type of debate, negotiating on comma, semi-comma, on the sentence of all these diplomats around. This is why I planted them to go and put my mouth where my money is. And this is what I'm going to do also in this panel. For instance, you are totally right, but you are driven by somebody else's agenda. When they have created the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, they were also targeting textile, because this was a time where people were slaving our people to make them produce a Ralph Lauren shirt at $4.75 ex factory and go and sell it $200, $250 in the developed economies. So this is what they were calling textile value chain. Textile value chain does not mean anything for somebody who has really done it. Is there anybody here who is wearing the same shirt in this room? Every shirt is different. And every of your clothes stems from a different value chain because it's a product. Because it's a product differentiation. But what they wanted was to say, okay, we are giving you opportunity to export duty-free, but these are our people who are going to come and slave your own people to produce them cheap, and you think you are creating jobs for that? No. So this whole discussion about the sex of the angels is the same thing about the rules of origin. W2 rules of origins are very clear. There is a certain percentage threshold of value addition that need to be created within the country in order to claim that origin. But me, I'm trying to get you now on another thing. To be practical, let them discuss the sex of the angels. And you guys, with what your brain and your influence you may have on politicians, let us set up a whole cluster development on African modern outfit. In Senegal, we have developed this type of outfit. You can make a different product just by changing the tones, by mixing things, by putting a pocket here or something like that. That means we are very creative. And we have succeeded to make it very elegant.
Oh, yeah.
Now everybody want to wear it. And this is typically African. We are having the declination in Ghana, in Nigeria, everywhere. These are value chains we control. So this is why we need to say, okay, I'm trying now to organize a program that I call Tech City. which is the technopole of creative industries for Senegal, where I would like to cluster 50,000 designers on the same area, brand new, to build a city around that. That means that I'm going to give them incentive for people who are planting cotton to supply. For people who are doing this type of threads, I'm bringing a school of design there. I'm giving common service centers, like the one we had in Ghana on our textile garment village at FIG. So we're going to specialize the whole system by now defining the agenda. Then what I have seen in Austria, I was in Austria 3 weeks ago. Before going to Senegal, I wanted to buy some presents. You know, this fabric like in Bazin, Getzner and everything. You know where I buy it? It is at the border of Switzerland and Austria. A lost village where the only Africans you see there are the Africans that are coming to buy that cotton that was made for us to manufacture it in Senegal. All this nice bubu you see and everything, the cotton is cultivated there, the fabric manufactured in Austria, and you go there, you hear people speaking my own language. The only people who are there, white people who are there, are the ones who are selling. Gets there. So then you see, okay, you are not in Vienna, you are not in New York, you are not in Washington, you are in the lost country, a village in the middle of nowhere. But they have developed a capability of supplying our own tailors, our own designers from fabrics, and there is no cotton seed in Austria. So why do we concentrate on seeing this is an opportunity to dress the whole world? Because everybody who sees this type of things, whether you are a European, you are a Chinese, you like it. And nobody can invent it in place of us. This is why I say my problem with the civil servants is they are driven by others' agenda. In Ghana, for instance, we've tried everywhere, every country I go, because I'm a designer too. This is my own design. So every country I go, I do master classes of design with some select designer and help them to say, look, you are doing this type of thing, but I don't like it to do it the African way. I wanted to finish it like Versace, like Brioni. This is why the first time I wore this type of thing in Miami, people were saying, they were thinking it was Versace. The next day I come with these things, they say, Versace is doing this. I say, no. Guy Shopping is doing that in Senegal. So this is the type of thing I think we should think about. And I would like you guys to carry the message. Atlantic Institute, you are supporting people to come together. Support them to come in value creation that creates jobs that stay in Africa.
Let this be the beginning of conversations. And as we said, we want to come up with actionable plans. I'm hoping we'll see something within the commitment around regional integration. This community is a community full of ideas. And my vision, if I was to dream, is for this community to also be a space where knowledge is generated, where action is generated as well. So for me, thank you, and thank you always.
I am Patronella Ngaba, and you've been listening to Atlantic Fellows Conversations from the African Regional Initiative Convening in Nairobi, Kenya. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it on and subscribe to the series wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about the Atlantic Fellows and their work, please visit our website at www.atlanticfellows.org.